Good day, everyone. We've been discussing sacraments, and here we're focusing on marriage as a sacrament that models faithfulness and generous service. And marriage is a very interesting topic. For myself in particular, it's almost like asking a Canadian, what is it like to be Canadian? Sometimes it's hard to know where to start. And when discussing marriage, there are immediately two things which always pop into my mind. Marriage is what brings us together today. And the second is a comment from a professor who once argued that he couldn't figure out why or how our society has gravitated towards monogamy. So he wondered out loud, how is it that society has this institution of marriage? I mean, think about it for a second. Does that make any sense, at least on the outside, looking in or from the surface point of view, that people might be bonded to another for the rest of their life? It's that whole ball and chain motif. Why would anyone want that? And he's not the only one to question it. As one comedian puts it, he and his wife have been happy for 20 years until they met. So marriage seems to have a bit of a bad rap. And many people in their 20s today not only spurn marriage, but any committed relationship whatsoever. This is perhaps in no small part due to social media, where you have all sorts of options for partners with essentially no strings attached. So who wants to be bothered by spending lots of money on a wedding, let alone being tied down in a relationship, or even having to invest yourself in one particular person when there are billions out here? We're going to look at, well, what are some of the advantages, benefits of marriage, and the secret life of those who experience matrimony. Now, to begin here, there's a bit of a difference between fleeting pleasure and perhaps the less seductive but great joy that comes when vowing oneself to another for the rest of your life, which in some cases means for decades. So here's a few quick points on why marriage has its benefits that it does. So why get married? Now, the first point is freedom. This one is perhaps the least understood and it's most underappreciated. So we'll start with this one. Marriage, and I'll repeat it because it's important, is freedom. That's right. So boundaries, as in I only have one partner and that partner is you, is very specific. So how does that give anyone freedom, you might ask? Well, it's like having borders or boundaries around a sandbox and having sand scattered all over your backyard and the grass under the fence. You have it contained in one place where you can actually use it to build and create all sorts of amazing things. And being contained has intense benefits. For one, you and your partner enter a whole new level of trust because you're not saying, I'm with you till the clock strikes midnight, or let's try and see how things work out over the next few days or weeks, or maybe give it a month or whatnot. So when you leave each other's presence, there's a stability in knowing that a person is committed to you and you alone. The disadvantage is that all the excitement of meeting a new romantic partner is gone. This is where a whole host of other advantages come in as well. The two of you can go places and take your relationship to another level, something that takes a lot of time. So it's the opposite of that instant gratification that our culture tends to magnify. It's a lifelong enjoyment of a deep and lasting love. So that's where the freedom comes in. Now, I'd argue there are fewer things we want out of life than that: deep, lasting love and freedom. And I'm not arguing it's easy, because it means keeping track of another, being attuned to another person's mood, desires, their emotions. It takes a significant amount of energy and money, so our resources. But wouldn't you want someone to do that the same for you? Being attuned to your mood, desires, emotions, and giving vast quantities of their time and resources to you? Again, it's important to stress, marriage isn't easy. Just like most things that have intense benefits to us, like exercise or discipline in general, likewise, marriage takes effort. It's hard, but it's one of the reasons why it has so many benefits. Now, here's another benefit related to some of those mentioned above. You live longer. So longevity increases for married couples, especially for men. Men tend to die several years, 2 or more, sooner than women. Why exactly, it's hard to pinpoint, but marriage does have this increased longevity for men and women as well. And it seems to be something to do with being emotionally invested in another person over the long run. That keeps you going And this also has benefits for your physical health as well. And married people, another benefit here, have less stress. So that's right. Well, of course, marriage has many stressors, but life in general does too. And life stresses single people out much more than it does those who are married. So those in long-term monogamous relationships have lower levels of cortisol. So when they swab saliva and so forth, they'll detect less cortisol or less stress in someone's system who is married compared to those who are single. Married people, here's another health benefit, who undergo heart surgery were 3 times more likely than unmarried people to still be alive 15 years later. So in other words, there's this association between surgery, positive surgery results in the long run in marriage. Married people are also less likely to be depressed. Now, if you compare young people in their 20s with young who are married with those who are in their 20s who are single, you see this in some of the results. So as one study notes, those who are single were, quote, more likely to drink to excess, to be depressed, and report lower levels of satisfaction with their lives compared to married 20-somethings. Now, this flies against most conventional wisdom that married people are unfulfilled, isolated, and just not living life to the fullest. In fact, the opposite seems to happen. When researchers piece this together, why married people suffer from less depression, they experience more satisfaction in life, and engage in less risky and destructive behavior, and live longer, and so on. Now, researchers say there's not one single reason for this, but some of them point to having that consistent partner in your life. This allows your mental health to improve. Why? Because you're better supported and less lonely. Your health gets a boost as well. At the same time, not only because you're more supported and less lonely, but you make less risky choices, you eat better, maintain a better lifestyle, and your immune system, importantly, also benefits as well. So these are some of the reasons why, as noted earlier, you have much better results with surgery if you're married, and actually have a much better chance of avoiding cancer and fighting it if you do get it. There are also a number of financial benefits, believe it or not. That's right. So yes, weddings can be expensive, but in the long run, marriage it seems to increase your wealth considerably. So governments generally desire stable families, and they give all sorts of incentives for couples to stay together. So if you get married and stay married, some studies have noted that you have a 70% increase in your net worth. So getting into a relationship and staying in it helps to alleviate poverty, and not just for you, but for your offspring as well. And here are another example of the benefits, financial ones, from paying lower taxes to having better insurance rates, and so on for those who are married. Now, the final benefit we'll look at here for marriage is theological. So we tie this back into faith. We can see that marriage mirrors or points to the mystery of God in our world. So just as God enters into covenant with humanity, marriage also involves a community, or better yet, a covenant between husband and wife. Now, a covenant is a commitment, an oath of trust in which both sides agree to certain terms. And it's not like a contract that you can just break or walk away from when it's convenient, or if another team offers you a better deal. So marriage, it's a sacrament, as a sacrament, has this profound level of commitment and trust and fidelity that reflects God's own commitment and steadfast love, or hesed, in the Hebrew term for steadfast love is hesed. Sometimes it's translated as loyalty or loving kindness. So in marriage, we try to imitate God's hesed. Now, of course, we fall short, but with grace, we can attempt nonetheless. And why do that? Well, life is short, and what better to attempt than to imitate God's hesed? And inasmuch as we do show that steadfast love, that loyalty, and loving kindness to our marriage partner, we're imitating God. Now, one last note about marriage is that this is a sacrament of service. Now, most people think marriage means a sacrament of service to your kids. And whenever one of my children asks for a spoon or a fork, or, perhaps to butter their toast, or, wouldn't you mind fetching the salt for me, please, Dad? I tend, in those cases, to point to the cupboard and remind them that they can find all the cutlery they need in the drawer, and the salt's actually in the pantry, and you're actually big enough to reach it. Now, I do this mainly because I want to empower them as fully functional individuals in the world. Sometimes they might respond though, but Dad, you ought to get us stuff because we asked you for it. And, you're our dad, so you better do it. Or at least you ought to, Dad. Now, there's a hint of truth in what they're saying, but it's only partially true. If we look at the paperwork, when I got married, my primary service, the sacrament of marriage, is owed to my wife rather than my children. Yes, as surprising as that sounds, marriage means you serve your spouse. So when my wife asks for something, I have to have a much different response. So those who are married are called to serve their spouses. Now again, this is in order that they may become the best versions of themselves. Sometimes this might mean arguing, questioning each other's decisions, and stress, but those things are part and parcel of a healthy relationship where two people value each other's opinions. And serving one another, we're able to allow that other person to flourish. At least that's the hope. And by extension, when we flourish, we're much better able to allow others to do the same, whether it's our friends, our family, our children, neighbors, colleagues, and so on. Right, now, here's some questions to reflect upon. Question number 1. What does it mean to say that boundaries give us freedom? Explain this paradox. How do boundaries give us freedom? Second of all, what are some of the benefits of marriage? All right, we listed quite a few of them. So what are some of them? Number 3, what benefits surprised you the most? Okay, fourthly, what are some of the possible reasons for these benefits? Okay, so what are some reasons why these benefits are found in married couples? 5th, how is marriage like a covenant? All right. 6, what does it mean? What do we mean by God's hesed? So what does that term mean? And finally, how does marriage model faithfulness and generous service?
No one ever said it would be so hard. Oh, let's go back to the start.